Today I thought we could talk about how healthy boundaries help us love ourselves. And so I'm sure this is no surprise to anyone. I'm sure we're all familiar with the idea of boundaries and the concept of healthy boundaries. And I've been thinking about this because it's been coming up in my life personally. This last week, I've been had the opportunity to set some healthy boundaries, and I really struggled with it. It was really, really struggled with feeling guilty about setting this boundary. And I can share some of the details with you. It's a pretty minor example as far as boundaries go. I think, as some of you know, I've been helping out the last several months at the Abbey of the Redwoods, helping to film their Sunday morning worship service. And for a while, I was actually kind of enjoying it. I mean, it just felt good to help out, and I still didn't know a lot of people here, so it was nice to have some sense of community going there and seeing familiar faces and saying hi to people. Then in February, I started working. I returned to full-time work. I increased my hours back to full-time work. And pretty quickly, it started to feel like a major drag getting up early on Sunday mornings. And so this was kind of building up, and I wanted to stop filming, helping out filming the church service, but I felt really guilty about saying that, about telling the pastor that I couldn't anymore, because he's this family friend. He's a friend of my father's, and there's no one else who really knows how to do it. So I mean, I felt really guilty about this, and also felt guilty about stopping going to church. I was feeling guilty about what the people in the church would think about me. And so, yeah, all these things where it was really hard for me to say what I wanted to say and do what I wanted to do, because I felt so guilty and I felt so bad about myself. And I know this is like I've said before, it's a really relatively minor example of setting a boundary, but I think it kind of makes it a little bit easier for us to talk about it without it being some really uncomfortable topic. So, but the same principles can apply to anywhere in life. Anytime we feel like we need to do something for ourselves, but by doing so, we feel like we're gonna negatively affect someone else. And so, especially for people like us, for highly empathic people, highly sensitive people who are very attuned to the emotional state of others, when we're in this situation, a lot of us struggle to do what's true to ourselves, because we don't want to negatively affect these other people. We feel really bad about causing this negative consequence for other people. And so I was kind of, for a few weeks or so, or a month or so, I was like trying to work up the courage to say this, trying to talk myself into setting this boundary. Then I heard Matt Kahn talk about this. So the timing was very fortuitous timing. He was talking about setting boundaries, and when we struggle to set boundaries, when we feel really bad about doing something for ourselves, the way he put it, it's often because we have a high level of presence. So that's when we have a high level of presence, a high level of emotional attunement to others, and a low level of self-worth. That's what a lot of these struggles with boundaries come down to, is not valuing ourselves as much as we value the other people we're affecting. And so I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this, that struggle of, for some reason, a lot of us feel like the emotional needs of others are more important than the emotional needs of ourselves. So even when there's something that we feel like we need to do or we want to do, we can struggle to do it, struggle to express this need, because we don't want to inconvenience other people. We don't want to let others down. We don't want to make other people feel bad. And so we wind up feeling really guilty, really bad about the thing that we need for ourselves. And so a way around this is to work on valuing ourselves. And even we can help to kind of logically look at the situation, because when when we value ourselves, when we do something good for ourselves, when we make ourselves happy, that's making one person in the world happy. And that's just as good as making another person in the world happy. So when we do something for another person and we make them happy, that's making one person happy, right? We're contributing to the overall happiness of the world by making this one person happy. But when we do that for ourselves, we're also still making one person happy. We're still contributing to the overall happiness of the world by making one person happy. And so it's just as important and just as valuable to make ourselves happy as it is to make another person happy. And sometimes with these issues around boundaries and feeling guilt around boundaries, sometimes we make it worse in our head. We overestimate the negative response of the other person. We can make it worse in our heads than it actually is. And I know in this particular case with this filming in this church service, I was playing out all these scenarios in my mind of how this conversation would go, and how the arguments I had for myself as to why I need to do this. I had all kinds of arguments laid out, and at some point when I was talking myself up, I was getting angry a little bit at times, and it helped me realize sometimes there is a healthy use for anger, just to help motivate us to take care of ourselves. But then when it all came down to it, when I finally worked up to the nerve to actually have this conversation, it was fine. He totally understood, and he said that it was no problem. He'd find someone else to do it, and he thanked me for all the help I'd done so far. So it was, I was imagining this whole conversation of him getting mad or getting upset or being disappointed and me feeling bad, but I made that all up in my head, and it was making it far worse than it needed to be. And when I finally worked myself up to the courage to have the conversation and set the boundary, I was surprised by how easy the conversation went. And so that's a good reminder to be careful about thinking we know how other people are going to react in any given situation. I think especially us as highly empathic people, we sometimes we overestimate how much we know other people, and we may think that we can sometimes get ourselves into trouble by thinking we know how someone's going to respond, or even sometimes thinking somebody is having a response but not telling us. I mean, we just have to be very careful about thinking we know what's going on in someone else's experience. Even sometimes what we feel from what we think we're feeling from other people, that's still being filtered through our attention. So even though we may often be able to be very sensitive, be able to feel what's going on in other people, we never know for sure what's actually going on in another person, despite what it feels to us. Even if we are very sensitive and we do often feel what's going on in other people, we sometimes may exaggerate what we think other people are going through in our minds. So it's very important to keep that in mind as well. And so I think the point of all this with setting healthy boundaries is that if we chronically struggle with setting healthy boundaries, a way out of it is to work on valuing ourselves, work on loving ourselves, work on recognizing that we deserve to be happy as much as everyone else around us in our lives. And we'll do some exercises in a little bit to work on that self-worth and self-value. But before we jump into that, I want to open up the floor and see if there's any questions or comments on this topic.